GDP has surged higher, beating expectations. Could crypto be the next to surge higher? We're going to talk about that. And we're also going to talk about the PMI cycle. I promised you all yesterday that we would do a little bit of a deep dive so that you'd have something to chew on over the holidays. Merry Christmas, by the way. Let's go ahead and jump into this Christmas gift of a GDP reading. I'm going to break it down and I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I do think it's bullish, despite its effects on the probability of a Fed rate cut. Sentiment outlook: GDP exceeds expectations. Fear and greed is down to 24 out of 100. This is still extreme fear. Federal Reserve 25 basis point cut in January, 17% likely as of this morning. But if we go to the live reading, this is now down to 13%. Okay, so it's becoming less likely that we get a cut in January. So that is important to note. That could change, right? We've seen swings back and forth with this recently. Here there was a tangle, or I'm sorry, in the previous in December, we saw quite a comeback in the fourth quarter type of deal. That was awesome. We'll see if that happens again. But as of now, investors really should be planning for no cut in January. That's the directionality is continuing on that. Major focus: US GDP smashes expectations. US Q3 GDP actual 4.3, the expected was 3.3, and the previous was 3.8. So the actual came in quite a bit hotter than anybody was anticipating. Now, just to round these out, precious metals continue to put in new all-time highs. Now, here's why this is important. The GDP rating is essentially what prevents a recession in a lot of ways. It's obviously much more than that, but when folks economists have used the word recession in the past, that has meant something. In my opinion, and in the opinion of many other smart people, the word recession no longer is relevant. So, per this reading on the GDP, this is going to probably continue to make the word recession even more irrelevant. But I'm removing it from my vocabulary as an economic term, right? If we have negative GDP at some point in the future, which this print is kind of proving that we likely won't see that in the near future, if the current economic dynamics remain the same. You have to just call it what it is. In the future, I wouldn't call two quarters of negative GDP a recession. I would call it 2 quarters of negative GDP. And if there was, unemployment that went above 10%, and for 2 quarters, I would call that 2 quarters of 10% employment. Putting this arbitrary term recession onto a world with artificial intelligence no longer makes any sense, in my opinion. So that's just my opinion, right? I'm here telling you all the news. The news is that we're going in the complete opposite direction of what would have previously been considered a recession. And that's very good. Now, what's not good is that likely is going to lead the Fed to say, hey, let's go ahead and pause in January. After all, this is what they did last year. They did a cut in September, and then they did 2 more cuts to round out 2024. And that's really what we've seen this go around as well. Cut in September and then 2 more, including December. So that's likely to be what they do again. In January of 2025, they stopped the cutting and they just kept pausing and pushing it down the road until they got to September of this year. I am not expecting a cut in January, but that's okay because the economy is in a very robust position, and this GDP print hopefully will now transition the economy from worrying about recessions, worrying about things that don't matter, worrying about things that are not real and used to be somewhat useful, but even weren't even useful then. They were really more political tools to try to call one side or the other bad or good, or highlight the economic performance of an administration. And that's just not useful anymore for investors, in my opinion. Okay, so moving along here, we'll keep moving because we do have a couple of bullish vibes, and I want to get to those before I get into the PMI cycle and why I think that next year is going to be very bullish for crypto. Bank of Russia considers allowing unqualified investors to buy crypto. Think retail was kind of their, non-institutional. That's bullish. Pro crypto Michael Sillage is sworn in as the new CFTC chair. That's bullish. He's generally pro crypto, doesn't see crypto as a security. Peter Thiel backed bank startup Erebor Bank is raising 350 million in a funding round that would value the firm at roughly 4.35 billion. That's important because this is a bank that could potentially replace Silicon Valley Bank and do a lot of the same lending to those edge innovators. That has ramifications more for tech in general, but this could also be a net benefit for crypto, as there is, generally more difficult to gain liquidity for some of these projects. Looking ahead, we still have the FOMC minutes coming in December 30th, right? If anything's going to have an effect back towards this being a cut, it may be this December 30th FOMC minutes. Maybe the Fed members were all kind of throwing up their hands saying, hey, we got to throw out the textbooks on this stuff, and we got to start thinking about debt, and we got to think about AI replacing jobs. And that's that. If they're saying that, that'll come out in the minutes, and then the rate hikes will be imminent in January. Not saying that's going to happen. That would be a moonshot, right? That would be pretty slim chances, but not zero. January 15th, MSCI decision on MSTR inclusions. Last time I checked, the polymarket spread on that is that MSTR will not continue to be included in MSCI. So investors should be bracing for that reality. With that said, we had some pretty good news coming out. I went ahead and brought together a couple of different purchases of MSTR, and Tim went ahead and aggregated that for his Twitter account. So check this out. Royal Bank of Canada bought 1.3 million strategy shares, over $233 million worth. Stephen Cohen, owner of the New York Mets and an asset manager, he bought 65 million of MSTR. And then the New York State Common Retirement Fund added to their existing allocation with 50 million purchase, bringing it to 114 million. So there are quite a bit of what I would call whales that are buying MSTR. I am sitting on the sidelines with MSTR. Do not hold it. And I think that MSTR is, it's questionable if the shares are going to be accretive to their business generation. I would like to get back into MSTR at some point in the future. I hold quite a bit of the other one, STRC, I believe is the ticker. Yeah, I believe it is. I could be wrong about that. Just speaking off the dome. Let's continue. Those are our bullish vibes. MSTR being excluded from MSCI is not a bullish vibe, right? But that's something to look forward to as an investor, and to kind of get our heads around that. Supreme Court ruling on tariffs, still thinking that's going to be important. Asia was mixed, with Japan and Shanghai were barely positive. Hong Kong was barely negative. So not much movement, not much commitment in one direction or another there from the Asian markets. All right, let's take a look quickly at Bitcoin here, because Bitcoin is moving to the downside. I went ahead and I've drawn some lines here for what I believe Bitcoin is kind of now in this pattern here. And so, whether or not we find support here on this line at 86,262 today, perhaps, or whether we come down and we return to this uptrending line of support put in by the wicks, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do, but I feel like today we're more than likely going to test to the downside, because yesterday was a test to the upside and then a close back down. So investors are not seeing the momentum they'd want to see. Of course, I say this now almost every time I go live. Our talented analysts are thinking that we go lower. 80, 74 are numbers and levels that we talk about quite often in our trading group. All right. So now I think we have a bit of time to get into the PMI cycle. Now, this is a cycle that has emerged from another analyst, Raoul Powell, and it's becoming much more contagious. It's kind of the answer, the going popular answer, the consensus of what really drives Bitcoin's price and what has driven Bitcoin's price as the 4-year cycle theory kind of comes to a close, or is in major contention with if it was the one that was moving Bitcoin's price or not. If you don't know what these terms mean, the 4-year cycle, you're going to have to go do your own reading on that, but I will define for you. the PMIs and the ISM. So this is PMI this is the ISM Manufacturing Index, a monthly indicator of U.S. Economic activity based on a survey of purchasing managers at more than 300 manufacturing firms. Okay, that's the PMIs. ISM is the Institute for Supply Management. They are just, they just go out and they gather data and they sell that data, right? And then some of it they publish to everybody in a public in a public print, similar to GDP and ADP and things like that. Okay, so I have prepared for you all a chart here, and I'm going to take myself off because I want to use as much screen surface area as I can to explain this. And remember, I am by far not the first person to present this. For example, Smithston With is an account that has made this chart overlaid, right? So put in the orange is Bitcoin, and in the green is ISM. And as you can see here, there's a very tight correlation. And you can see also in the red, with the red background, that usually marks kind of the bottoming, right? And then the green background is where you have the potential for the topping there. So there is a pretty tight correlation to this PMI, right? Remember, it's a monthly indicator of U.S. economic activity based on a survey of purchasing managers. So it's a survey of data. And if we go to my screen that I have pulled up, you can see that we have not returned to where we would need to return for Bitcoin to reach that euphoric phase and for crypto to reach that euphoric phase, right? ISM has essentially remained below 50, which is the white line that I have here. You can see it, just this line here. Without the blue line going above 50, that is actually contraction in the manufacturing industry of the United States. Okay. Now, if you asked me, Taylor, how is U.S. manufacturing and Bitcoin's price related? I can tell you simply, it is because as the United States and people that are invested in the United States manufacturing sector, as manufacturing makes more money, right? That is a very big engine of real revenue flows, and that expands essentially the amount of liquidity that's sent down into retail, right? And so when retail gets their hands on much more money, that then flows into risk assets, like specifically Bitcoin. Now, that's me saying an explanation, right? And that may not have made a whole lot of sense to you. The reality is what Raoul Pal and some other economists and analysts have realized is actually quite puzzling, right? But it's undeniable. What is undeniable is that there is this tight correlation between ISM and Bitcoin's price. And considering ISM has not returned to the upside yet, it kind of explains why there was not a euphoric phase, is because the manufacturing side of America did not get into fourth gear and fifth gear, right? It stayed in first, second, and third gear. And although we did see some tick ups, we didn't see a big cyclical shift back into the green zone, right? We stayed in red with brief periods of green. Okay. So is something wrong? Is American manufacturing kaput? Is it over? Is it done for? That doesn't seem to be what the case is. It seems to be that there's just been a delay, and we can accredit that delay to the Fed, right? The Fed has kept quantitative tightening on, and that is essentially what I would say is there to explain the ISM prolonged contraction, right? Other people are going to refer to this as the business cycle. You can see this says here, the business cycle, ISM PMI business cycle. The business cycle has a very strong correlation to quantitative tightening and easing policies. Okay. I'm saying a lot here. I really hope this is landing. I think for some of you all, this is very clarifying, extremely clarifying. I think for others, this is just maybe more confusing. I would just encourage you to watch this back again, and that should hopefully be a little more clarifying. All right, let's go to my chart here and just kind of show you all. In 2024, we had essentially this lining up. Let me line these up a little better here. Oh, I had this perfect earlier, and of course now it's going to be all crazy. Yeah, this is just going to have to bear with me. These were lined up, but essentially you have this height here, and you have this height here, and these peaks are correlative, and they explain again, when Bitcoin's price is going to go up and go down. And this wasn't observed until Raoul Pal observed this, and now this is becoming again quite the consensus explanation of what actually drives Bitcoin's price. And the big takeaway, right? The big takeaway is that you've had this prolonged contraction instead of this, right? Movement higher. Okay. Now Bitcoin has gone higher, right? Bitcoin has gone higher. But if I show you if I put a power law indicator on top of Bitcoin and go out to the weekly chart, you can see that, yeah, Bitcoin has gone higher. But in the past, Bitcoin spends quite a bit of time outside of this range, right? You have this power law range. This is an exponential logarithmic movement. Those are big words. I apologize for all the jargon here, but you had, in the case of the 2018, 2017 peak, you had it moved quite a bit out of the top range here of the power law, and then the same thing here in the 2021 peak, and also the spring peak of 2021 as well. You had quite a bit of price action outside of that. If you zoom forward into the present bull market, we haven't seen that movement, right? Now, what explains the price movement to the upside that we have seen during this period off of that bottom range is, just generally that probably that can be explained by the 4-year cycle, right? Is that we've removed supply and demand has stayed the same. But in order to get that euphoric phase, right, where price comes up and gets outside of this range, something that would look like this, right? You have to have these correlation. You have to essentially have this not do that and this do this instead, right? We haven't seen it. The question is, when will we see it, right? And that's where this bottom pane, that's where this comes in, right? And the reason I have this one pulled up, this is the United States Kansas Fed Manufacturing Index. This one is a little bit ahead of schedule, right? If you line these up, the Kansas Fed Manufacturing Index actually tends to front run a little bit the regular PMI, right? The United States ISM Purchasing Managers Index. So the Fed also does a manufacturing index, and that's what's on the bottom of the screen. And as you can see, when I line these up, they mostly have similar peaks and troughs, right? So what do I see here if I look at just this pane? Essentially, what I see is that we just had a much higher print, right? Because now we're trying to answer the question of like, okay, I understand this correlation, but what happens next and when? We just had a much higher print. Now we had a lower print, right? But it's a lower high, it's a higher low, I should say, and we're getting higher highs, right? So you can't really read, this isn't a price, so to speak. It's a manufacturing index. So just to bring it all together, we're getting early indications that the force that actually drives Bitcoin's price is starting to tick up, right? And there's so much to unpack from there. It's not that simple. The question of when is definitely not answered by these series of charts that I've shown, but it does start to give explanation as to why we haven't seen Bitcoin get to 150 and why we haven't seen any kind of euphoria for altcoins moving higher. And it really has to do with the Fed having a prolonged monetary policy of quantitative tightening that prevented the PMI cycle from getting above 50 and pushing higher and testing north of 55 into the 60s, right? And there's quite a bit of understanding to be done when it comes to what the linkage between manufacturing and Bitcoin prices, but it really just comes down to liquidity, right? It's liquidity stupid. Make sure you understand liquidity. And I'd say that's a quote. I'm not calling anybody stupid. All right, folks. I think I'm going to leave it there. It was very good for me to be able to have this time to explain this to you all. Let me know. Is this the first time that you've heard this explained? Did I do a decent job of explaining it, or are you more confused than when I found you? Is this the first time you heard it explained? I want to know down in the comments, and I would love to answer any questions that you might have in our Discord. If you're looking for a team of analysts that are looking into stuff, reading newsletters of other analysts, listening to podcasts every single day from crypto analysts and macro analysts, then look no further than the link down in the description. You've heard me talk about it before. It's the Tim Warren Trading Group. This is where I get all of my trading tips from our awesome team of analysts and chartists. And it's where Tim goes live and helps folks learn how to do learn how to trade through live trading videos. And it's where I put this sentiment outlook every morning, right? And folks get access to that. So you get access to that and so much more. Live Q and A's. You get access to trade setups, right? And people are making money. So it's great. We're having a ton of fun, and I'm really appreciate in 2025 you guys coming to this channel and to the Tim Warren Trading channel on YouTube and just playing a part, right? And maybe you aren't even trading. Maybe you're just kind of passively investing in Bitcoin and maybe even Ethereum. That's awesome too. We really appreciate that you chose our community to be a part of. And I wouldn't just encourage you that when you decide you want to learn how to trade and take that next step, that you would choose our trading community to be that first step in your journey. With all that said, I'll read through some names here. Yori was almost the first chat here. Sushi Garden said, Merry Christmas. Eve, Mr. Shrum. Yes, Merry Christmas to you all, and Merry Christmas Eve. Angelo CV said, good morning, Taylor. What's up, Shrum? Do you think we will see a select alt season in Q1 2026? I think it has a lot to do with the PMIs that I just showed you, right? And we'll be getting a PMI print in January, and that will be pretty clarifying. We may even get one before the end of December. I don't think we will. But remember, all that is a survey, right? So the ISM is out there surveying all these manufacturing COOs and saying, hey, what are you seeing out there? Excuse me, had to sneeze. So I don't think that altcoin season is purely based around ISM, but I do think that the high correlation between the PMI index, the PMIs, and crypto is undeniable, right? Going back to this chart here is pretty undeniable. So do I believe that we're going to get an alt season in Q1? I can't be that precise with when in 2026 we'll see quite a bit of upside for altcoins. I mean, right now, kind of the villain to this is the fact that PMIs just are not breaking above 50, and you're getting silver and gold breaking into new all-time highs, right? And so obviously money is rotating into those precious metals, as well as the AI narrative that is awesome over on the stock market side. So by the way, guys, one thing you should know is that I'm playing both of those, right? I had quite a bit of silver. I took profits too early on it earlier in the year, as it would turn out. But my physical silver did not. I did not sell, right? So I'm glad that I held on to that. And then when it and now I'm allocating to palladium, right? Because I'm sitting here looking at silver and saying, man, this is overbought. I really don't want to buy this at the all-time highs, especially when I'm very confident in another asset class that it's going to get allocation soon. And so, my conclusion is to buy the underbought precious metal, which is palladium. So that's what I'm doing. I'm also looking at platinum too, but that one is, up and away quite a bit already as well too. So you got to stay diversified, right? That's been a big lesson of 2025. I also played quite a bit of tech stocks, right? And so, names like Robinhood and Palantir really helped balance out my portfolio so that even though the altcoin side did 30% to the downside, for me in 2025, right, there was still quite a bit of buoyancy and stability because of my allocation to some stocks that just had an absolutely, blockbuster year. So, keep that in mind overall for 2025 because of how heavy I am into altcoins. This was not my best year, right? So, I'm keeping that in mind. I'm making decisions based on that, but I can confidently say that I have not sold any altcoins since around August when I went ahead and sold out of Cardano and Compound. Since then, I've just been a net buyer of crypto. I did go ahead and sell MSTR. That was a painful one, but the reason for that was not because I don't think that MicroStrategy is going to do well. I think MicroStrategy is going to do phenomenally, but I don't know that that's going to be accretive to MSTR ticker, right? I think it may be more accretive to their preferred shares, and that's a whole nother ball game. But that's essentially my view on investing right now, and I hope you all are kind of keeping your wits about you, not getting sad because altcoins are down. It's an opportunity to purchase, names like Solana, Ethereum, and Bitcoin. I believe are going to be much higher in the future than they are today. Right? It's not rocket science, and if you want to go further down the risk curve into names like maybe Aave, Uniswap, Chainlink, Toncoin, there's a whole long tail of riskier plays, Ondo, that come into there. But right now, if you're newer to investing or you're just tired of altcoins, right? You've had it with the downside. I would say that shifting up the curve, and this is a lot of what we talk about in the trading group, shifting up the curve into the Solanas, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a couple of other names, that is going to make you sleep better at night, right? That's going to bring you less anxiety. So I don't like to encourage people to trade based off of emotion and try to reduce anxiety and fear and greed and all that kind of stuff. Really just buy what you think is going to be worth more in the future, right? You buy it low so that you could sell it high. That's the name of the game. But you do have to also remember you're human, and those are important considerations as well, folks. I hope that you've enjoyed and learned from my analysis here, my presentation on the PMI cycle. I hope that it was useful for you all. Have a great rest of your day, and Merry Christmas. The next time you'll be hearing my voice is likely either Friday or Monday of next week. Adios.